Hey guys, Raymond McCrea Jones here with ATL Photo Night. I'm here with my friend Ben Lowy. So Ben was passing through Atlanta. I heard he was here, and so I rushed over to do a quick conversation with him before he's on to his next job. I wanted to ask Ben specifically about the breadth of his work over the years, because you've done so many different things. Started in conflict photography, 2003-ish, right?
Yeah.
And then you did many years of that, did a book, and then have really diversified and explored other disciplines of photography beyond that. So my question is, a lot of times we hear as artists, you have to choose a lane and be known for that thing, or else you're screwed.
Right.
No one's gonna know who or what you're about. And so your notion of choosing to embrace this sort of exploring other things and making that maybe your calling card is really intriguing. And by all means, you're not the first one to do that. There's many great examples, but I'd just like to hear your take on why and how you've navigated that path.
Well, I mean, when I first started photography, I thought like I wanted to do something specific. And then I realized, and I had sort of these epiphany moments, and a lot of it was built around having kids, but that there's more to the world than just one way of looking at it. And that sort of led me to explore different, maybe taking advantage of an assignment and explore different options for what I can do. I think I came to realize that photography for me was a ticket to just explore the world and to see different things and experience different things. And so I ended up embracing the idea that I could do work that was more esoteric, or I could do underwater work, or I could do, adventure work or fashion. And now I'm doing a ton of like lit portraits, which I never thought I would do. I probably, the only thing I haven't done as photography is like wedding photography. It's like, but that to me makes me more complete. The idea, there were a lot of times like I would look online and I was like, that's awesome, and I've never done that, and that made me want to do stuff.
So it wasn't so much getting bored with what you were doing, it was just the curiosity to explore other ways, right?
I mean, I also think like once you do something all the time, and especially as you get older and older, you kind of burn out on it. You kind of get like, it becomes rote. Like I know that like when we did sort of work in war zones, you would almost have this checklist of things that you would do to fulfill the kind of tropes of a photojournal. And I think after a while, you just understand that it's empty and vapid, and you're just playing to tropes. You're just playing to the ideas of things that we have to do, because that's what everyone expects. And that what, makes a successful sort of, essayistic approach to photography. It's the same way like, like the National Geographic way of having, the wide shot, the tighter shot, the medium shot, like, where there's a formula. And I think that for me, it was trying to figure out how to break out of that and trying to push myself, because I think this is probably a problem that all photographers and artists go through, is that we all have like a certain level of self-confidence and belief in ourselves. But at some point we have to realize that our measuring stick for self-worth is actually based on other people's perception of our work. About if no one likes your work, you feel like, oh, I'm a shitty photographer, I'm a shitty sculptor, because we have to gain value of our work through what other people think. And after a while, it becomes tiring, where you can't trust your own opinion of your work. And I think there are very few photographers, and I'll say photographers because that's sort of the industry. I know you have like someone like Kudelka, who just shoots
his own thing, no matter what.
And he just does, but he also sleeps on a couch, and famously didn't have a home for a long time, so it's, but it's hard, and now that you have like Instagram and social media, people become addicted to this idea of who likes my stuff. And I could say like that is definitely is like, you look at it and say, oh, if I don't get enough, that means my work isn't good enough. And I think part of what I needed to do for myself was to find a different way to have affirmation, and that was by exploring different, genres. I mean, there was a point where, and I haven't continued this project, but there was one time where anybody who came to my house, I photocopied their face. I don't know, like
Right.
it was just something
Just for
to
you,
do,
yeah.
just to do something different. Or like my walkscapes idea, which is which I've been doing for 6 years, and in a way it needs to move on, but that was just an anti-documentary piece of work.
Sure.
And I like looking at the work that is different,
Okay.
where people are trying to interpret things a little bit differently.
So you're moving from, beginning in conflict photography and moving through exploring other sort of avenues of photography as a way of challenging your own notions of what your creativity is, maybe. And I'm wondering, when you learn, like you went to art school, but you did conflict photography, does that foundation of like really pure brute force in a way, photojournalism, is it still infused? Do you feel like it's still infused?
I can't get away from photojournalism, and I still really embrace that as part of my identity. And in a big way, like I've stopped looking at photojournalism because I feel like I need to move away from that, because then I don't feel guilt. Consume that I'm not doing it anymore, and see the things and wish I was doing it. And so, yeah, it's still very much a part of myself, and I still will walk around and see, a canyon of light and people walking through it, and I'll be like, I want to do that. But then there's this thing inside me which doesn't want me to pull out my camera. And I have to say that for the last few years, all I've wanted to do was scuba dive and photograph that. And now I've actually really gotten into portrait work, lit portrait work. And then I'm exploring, like I'm doing crazy stuff on Photoshop, because with portraits you can. And I actually started doing freelance graphic design, where I'm creating images for, just brands, where I'm melding, and it's a learning experience, so much fun. I never, as a photojournalist, like let's say I never dove into Photoshop, it'd be like curves and saturation and, and now I'm like exploring all the options that are there. And then, even with lit portraiture and moving lights around, I actually ended up buying it's a little freaky because people could see it in my wife and I, our office space is in like a normal office building with like lawyers and stuff like that, and the glass door in front of our studio you can see right in. And I bought this off Amazon, like a lifelike mannequin head that we've mounted on a C-stand so I can practice lighting, and like and it's freaky looking because it's like real skin. It's a little bizarre, and to me that's like, and then all of a sudden I was like, why not just take photos of mannequin heads and like dress them? So I bought like wigs, and I have like a Donald Trump wig that I'm like, and I was like, oh, maybe this is a project, portraiture with not real people.
Okay.
And then like my wife and I have this blog about parenthood, and we ended up like different people can contribute to it, and someone wrote a story about how to introduce race to your kids, and how race is into like the kind of media world that kids experience. So we were using the Black Panther movie as a way to explore explaining, through superheroes, race. Or like we taught our kids about civil rights. We're saying like, oh, Cyborg could never be on the Justice League with Superman until, and we started photographing the toys for that. And I was like, well, this is kind of fun. And then, started looking at, there's a photographer who has a studio who only creates miniature cars and actually creates commercials for like Audi. Like they had commissioned him. You can't tell that it's not a real car, but it's all like a little thing in his studio. And I was like, that's kind of cool too. And then you look at like Marenkal and like what that was, where that guy reconstructed just scenes. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then so you start exploring whole new world, and I'm like, I want to play with toys, so I wanted to, I buy my kids all like the super cool superhero toys, and they don't play with them as much as I want to.
So being an eternal student is what I'm hearing, like always being willing to learn. Also, I want to give a big shout out to your wife, Marva Car, amazing photographer. I know you guys team up on a lot of stuff now. And so being an eternal student, always being willing to learn and progress into other areas is sort of your thing. So you're passing through Atlanta now, doing some work. I don't know if you can talk about that, but in general, what are you doing now? A lot of lit portraiture. What's sort of the next thing for you?
I have no idea. And that's both scary and kind of inspirational.
Right.
And it, you know, if you're having a bad day, it's scary. And if you're having a good day, it's sort of cool because you don't know what's next. Our whole industry is changing so much. The value of photography is very different than it used to be because every single person has a camera in their pocket. And if my mom takes 1,000 pictures of her garden in one day, she's guaranteed to get at least one good image. So where do we stand as image makers, as professional image makers? Or, you know, normal camera sales like SLRs are down more than they've ever been before because, you know, and now there's computational photography. I know Sony and Microsoft just joined forces to create something new. So where do we stand? And my wife and I have like started creating, like we wrote decks for she wrote it for a TV show based on like the adventures of our kids, and we've taken our kids different places. My 7-year-old swam with great whites, and like we filmed it, and we just came back from doing a Nat Geo Wild short in Kenya where we went on safari, but it was really about the kids on safari and the things that they learned. I am not a very good land wildlife photographer. I've learned that. But, you know, now shooting video and film, oh, that's different. It's a whole new way of seeing, and that's interesting, and I like exploring that. And I think as photographers, where you sit and hold an image and wait for it, can actually translate to creating really cinematic work where you're not constantly moving.
Sure.
But that's worth exploring. I think there's all kinds of interesting stuff coming up, and you have to end up, I think, to explore and be an artist, kind of be a futurist and think about, oh, what the technology is. Do I want to shoot 360 work, or do I want to use a patchwork of images to create something? I know Michael Muller, who does all like the Marvel movie posters, also did a big project on the oceans and with sharks, and his shark work actually I love, and I have his book on my desk, and that's all about, you know, he's doing 360 video work where it's immersive. Like, is the future doing 360 work? Is it doing, you know, I think for Time Magazine back during the RNC and the DNC 4 years ago, they gave me the Google Jump Camera, which is like an array of 16 GoPros to create real 3D, and I would just hold it above my head, and like you had to have like a crazy battery pack, and you don't even, they have cameras now that do that are small enough. So like, is that the future? And I think all those things are worth exploring as an artist, you know, because why not? I mean, and you know, like I would love to get back to drawing and do comic books. I'm not as good as I want to be, but like, you know, there's all different ways to really push yourself and push creativity. Because ultimately, otherwise we're just, you know, office workers. And I, you know, when I walked around Manhattan or New York City, and there are all those buildings and all those people, and they're all in kind of rote jobs, right? And they experience life in a very different way. They have a schedule, they have a regimen, like I go to work for this amount of time, I can come home, I can play video games, watch a movie, go to the gym, right? We have to be a little bit more disciplined to be able to do that, but at the same time, we're free to sort of explore.
Yeah, it's a gift what we have, isn't it? Yeah. Ben, thank you so much for coming, having this conversation. Definitely want to get Ben in for a real ATL Photo Night soon.
That'd be great.
You guys can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and all that, atlphotonight.com. Next one's June 13th with Quantrell Colbert. Ben, thank you so much. Best of luck, and we'll see you again soon.
All right.
Thanks.